Thanks everyone for joining in. Let me quickly get over the tool that we use. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Zoom, but just in case you have questions, please do key in your questions in the Q&A bar so it'll be easy for the moderator to pick it up. You can also post your questions on the chat bar as well, and I'd be happy to pass them on. All right, so for the session today, we're having a conversation with Mr. Ajay Nambiar on designing customer experience around high value products. Uh, just to quickly introduce him, Ajay Nambiar is the Chief Experience Officer at M3M India Private Limited. He's a leading CX expert and a noted public speaker with over 35 years of experience in business operations and CX, spanning across industries as hospitality, technology, and real estate. He's been associated with several leading brands in the country and globally, which is including ITC, BPL, Sifi, Yahoo, Holiday Inn, Mahindra Holidays, Himar India, and L&T Realty. He's established several business practices which are currently used as industry benchmarks and executed diverse strategies that has successfully set up customer-centric brands across industries. As I was mentioning, he's a well-recognized speaker and speaks at most of the prestigious events today in the country. He's completed a senior leadership program from IMA, and he holds a master's and bachelor's degree in hospitality management. And as I was talking, he's an avid marathoner and triathlete, which you guys should obviously listen. Let me quickly introduce our moderator today, MD, who's the founder of this forum. He's an alumni of the IIT Madras, Michigan State University, and Stanford Business School. And he's been an industry veteran, having been there for 32 years, and an entrepreneur now for the last 18 years. He was one of the first managing directors of Dell International Services and one of the pioneers of the contact center industry in India. Currently, he's a mentor to many startups and a passionate customer experience advocate, which is all what our topic is about today. So with that, I hand it over to you, MD.
Well, thank you, Renan, and welcome, Ajay. It's wonderful to have you on this forum. We had a lovely chat. We had a lovely chat, so it's kind of hard to switch from talking about marathons to, customer experience and stuff. So let's see how it goes. So, I know you from what, early 2000s when you were with Mahindra,
so.
Right? Mahindra Holidays. So, that was an interesting product, Timeshares. And of course, after that, you moved on to reality and, you were in L&T, as you said, for a while as well. So these are all what people call high value kind of products. So maybe best way to start is to, give us your view of what really is a high value product. Is there something like that? How do customers perceive it that way?
Thanks, MD. Thanks for having me on this chat. And you're right, from a marathon to a discussion on CX, it's an interesting, it's like the triathlons that we were talking about, switching from one to the other. Let me just probably focus on, from my experience, having spent a stint in hospitality, hotels, which is of course luxury, and real estate, because at the end of the day, yes, real estate is a product which, it's a lifetime investment for all of us. For most of us, actually, it's a lifetime investment. You would invest in that one home of yours, put in all your savings that you have into that one big investment. So from an investment class, it is, of course, right there on the top for people from an investment perspective. I think the other side would be, the uber rich would probably invest in art or, in boats and ships and, and kind. Or rare watches and rare stuff. So to me, yes, it is, of course, right up there in terms of value creation or people's net worth enhancement. It is one of those asset classes. If you ask me, it's a great investment tool. It does have its ups and downs, but not as many peaks as probably the stock market, and has generated good returns. So from, I think, all points of view, real estate really would be one of them, which would, I would think, classify as a high value, high involvement product unique because a product which you invest 85% of your life saving is only seen 4 years down the line. Till then, you just live on hope. In a country like ours, where it was predominantly driven by developers and not regulated, RERA brought that into fashion, the consumer voice. Very, very important. Regulation has helped streamline a product such as this. Timeshare was an interesting product too, because that also it goes through its cyclical ups and downs. Every 10 years there is some kind of a regurgitation of the product. Now it is stabilized with only one or two large players that have existed in this market. So I think from that point of view, these products are very high involvement, and they actually are over a longer lifetime of an individual, as opposed to a use and throw. If I can just give that as a classification, that these last you a longer time. A high value car, for example, also lasts you a longer time. So there is a time band to it, and the value that product gives you over that time band is what probably enhances the value. So from that point of view, it's yes, it definitely would classify as a high value product.
And there's an emotional connect to it as well, I guess. Yeah, right. I mean,
Yes.
like you said, probably the only home. There's a lot of emotion involved with it. In a way, so is it with holidays as well, and timeshare. There is some level of emotional connect to it as well.
I would love to talk on that. I would love to, if I can take a minute. Let me just take timeshare.
Please do.
On the Club Med model, Mahindra Holidays, where I worked, it was predominantly on a Club Med model. And what I loved about it, I'm not too sure if you have stayed at one of the timeshare properties as a timeshare member. I'm a timeshare member apart from you have. So, I think what I love about that is if you go to a hotel, and having spent the first decade of my career in hotels, that is pure hospitality, a hotel is luxury, right? So you pay for a luxurious resort room, you're wined and dined by the who's who. You go to a restaurant and it's got fine cut glass, and the crockery and the cutlery and the service is par excellence. But that is a very exclusive personal experience. So it's your personal space and just you and your space. So you have complete privacy. And of course, people want that more than anything else. Timeshare, on the other hand, actually brings you out of your comfort zone. It has involvement of the entire family, and that's how the model works wonderfully well. Who your next door neighbor is, because you meet in the evening over a fireside. There's a fireplace where the families meet. During the day, the kids get to do activities with employees called fund rangers, who organize activities for the whole family. So what you actually do at the end of a 7-day holiday is you've made new friends, which is so unique. So you're right. The emotional connect is not going to a resort, because you can pay and go to any resort. But the fact that they encourage you to meet with other families, there's a daily evening cocktail with the resort manager who introduces himself, introduces the staff. I just find that bonhomie of family get together in a unique place. Most of these resorts are far flung. They're not very close to a city or a town, which is what makes it outstanding or unique. And then you have families who get together and you spend time together, go on a trek, you do a Burma bridge and stuff like that. Real estate on the same side, you're right. The decision, very, very emotional, because the decision is a lifetime product. The entire family and the extended family is involved in that decision. And then you actually spend your lifetime, or your family spends his or her lifetime in that product class, which you call home. And I don't think there's any other place that gives you an emotional connect than home.
Sure. So, given that there's a emotional connect, given that it's perceived as high value and something which will last for a long time, any mistakes made at the time of selling get magnified. I mean, especially from a support customer service perspective. And I know I have also been, victim of that. Misselling is very common. Actually, both in timeshare and in real estate, both that. So give us some perspective on that. I mean, do companies try their best to reduce misselling? If so, how? because it's very tempting to, you're finally selling something which you, as you said, you get to see only after 4 years. So you can get away with saying things which may not be true.
You're right, MD. There is no hiding away from that fact. Sales targets as they are, and I don't think necessarily only to these two industries. I think it is probably the nature of the beast anywhere. However, these two industries have a longer gestation. When I say gestation, they have a longer lifetime involvement rather than anything else where somebody missells it to you and tomorrow you say, okay, I'll just jump to another product. These two are very interesting products. You can't jump. Unlike anything else where I have a choice, here you're stuck for 25 years in a timeshare to that extent. I'm not saying stuck. I don't want to use the word stuck. I'm saying it's an investment which is not where like an insurance policy that if I don't feel comfortable, I've got 20 other options to take another insurance policy because all are competing. There's no differentiator between them. Real estate and timeshare are a 25-year lock-in or a lifetime lock-in. So from that point of view, yes, it is not that they do not have the challenges of commitments or things said which necessarily may not turn out. And I'll give you a couple of examples. You take a building and somebody says, hey, you know what? You will have you'll have a view of the sea. And I'm giving you a room with a view of the sea. Selling pitch to say you can see the sea today. But unfortunately, he can't guarantee that tomorrow another building won't come in front and block your view. And you have paid, which is a preferential location charge for a sea view room, a sea view apartment. And in 5 years, it is no longer sea view. But you can't change the orientation of that building to try and get a sea view again. So from that point of view, I think there are some limitations. Sure, there are. Outside of that, yes, it does happen that I don't think it is very, very rampant, so to speak, because at the end you have to sign. See, the good part of all these products is you actually sign an agreement.
Yeah.
Right? You have to sign an agreement before you make your payment. And most of Indians are very, very conservative from that point of view that they do check documentation. And these documents, by and large, will tell you what you'll get. Yeah, you can say I expected a very big clubhouse. Now, that's very subjective. I expected the clubhouse to be 20,000 square feet because my neighbor is in a clubhouse which is 20,000 square feet and you've given me a 10,000 square foot clubhouse. So probably those expectations are not tempered well from the product's point of view because people come with that expectation. All these are experiences that they've already encountered and then they buy a product. So I've stayed in a place which is on rental and I find that there are 20 treadmills. And now I bought a house and there are only 5 treadmills. Oh my goodness, there is something wrong. Yeah. So I think it comes more from that. And also because over 4 years, they built up this expectation of something which is grander than what they ever expected when they booked it in the first place. So yes, it may not as much be a mis-selling as much as expectation management.
Yeah. So good point. Expectation management is absolutely right. How expectations are set and so on. So given the fact that, you've been running the post-sale kind of, functions in several of these places, how do you kind of reset, manage these expectations? Because again, it's a hard thing to do. Okay.
A guy who's come from hospitality, my first experience in real estate was I was thrown into the deep end to meet with what industrial relations would call a workers' strike. And I just call it workers' strike, where I had to meet with, I think, 70 to 80 very irate owners. That was my first induction. But after you've passed through something like that, you can handle anything in life. It was a unique experience for me because all the other experiences were one-on-one. You can handle a customer one-on-one. It's relatively easy. Technology, you deal one-on-one, or you do a mass communication, which is, one to many. But in this environment, to be sitting in front of 80 owners and to manage their expectations. And then you have social media, where if somebody's tap, for example, there is a leakage in the tap and they post it on social media, 40 other people will comment saying their tap also is leaking, where it may not be true. So, there is this noise around social media, and I call it noise for want of a better word, which exasperates the problem. It doesn't solve the problem. But that's the nature of the beast, to be honest. What one realizes, sorry.
Yeah, I understand that, but is there something proactive which can be done? I know that, what you're talking about, there's a kind of the crowd jumps in, right? You talked about the leaking tap kind of an example, but is there something which can be proactively done with the customer base?
Yes. So what we do, for example, is if you involve the customers, and I'll give a couple of examples during the construction phase, for example, of a building. Say it's a 36 or 48-month construction cycle, and you update the customer, and which is what we do. We have now with technology of drones and virtual reality, etc., MR, that you're able to give the customer an experience of how his building or project is coming along. So his involvement is not at the end stage when the product is ready, but at through the life of the product evolving. There's a lot of acceptance when they see how their product is coming up, because not everybody is located with stages of construction are happening is one. So that's something that has a very, very close connect with customers, that they get involved in the product. Emaar does a very interesting thing. Emaar, and this is Dubai, the principal in Dubai, and I had the good fortune of working or spending time for 8 years with them. They do something called a tour. So Emaar doesn't allow you to enter the complex till it's completely ready, and then there's a grand opening. But then they have a tour, which is before it is ready, they take you around a guided tour of where you're going to live. And I think that is fascinating, because somebody who has, just seen everything behind a closed door and it says coming shortly, is suddenly given a sneak preview of what's coming. Then you're taken around. It's basically a guided tour of before you take it over.
So is it virtual? Is it done virtually?
No, they take you on ground. So they take you around. So it's of course a well-managed tour. So they take you around the landscaping, which is done. They take you, hey, here's your clubhouse. Then they take you into the lobby, and the lobby is grand. Then they take you up the lift to your apartment, and they show that to you and say, by then you're very convinced that what you've invested in is what you're getting. So a lot of this gets resolved, or in their mind that their investment is worth it, that there are no surprises. I think these are some of the tools and techniques which have worked wonderfully well.
Yeah, in fact, I'll come to technology specifically a little later, because I think there's so much opportunity here, and it's kind of still a very kind of new area for tech, I suppose. Correct. I mean, this is, after all, truly brick and mortar stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So before we go to that, I wanted to talk about the long gestation periods which you have, and you talked about how expectations can keep getting set and reset. Now, there will be, possible issues, because, you're involving local government, local authorities, and, all those as well. So if something is promised and it cannot be delivered, I'll give an example. Let's say somebody's committed Kaveri water. Okay. I'm talking about, Bangalore and, somebody, and Kaveri water, unfortunately, doesn't come because of some hitch with the government, or, the government has changed or something like that. How do you get back and manage the customer on such a thing?
Yeah, very valid. And I think it's a very interesting point that you have touched upon, MD. If you look at what RERA has done, and the reason I come back to RERA, because I think RERA to a large extent has brought the consumer upfront. The customer is upfront and he has a voice. However, one leg is missing in RERA. It only has two legs. It has a developer and it has the customer. It does not have the approving authorities. Right? And typically in real estate, you go through 50, 60 approvals during the lifetime. There's no accountability on the approvals. You're accountable for your delivery on time, because that's your agreement and you're supposed to handle all the approvals. But I do hope at some point RERA will also bring in the third element. And I think the government is very progressive. Today's central government is quite progressive in making all government departments accountable. They also want to, real estate is one of the key indices, infra and real estate is one of the key indices on ease of doing business and our ranking. So the government is also very, very clear that, your documents, like your agreements, should be brought online. Approvals should be brought online. And I think that will happen sooner than later. So that being the case, let's come back to your Kaveri. I think there are realities in life people understand. In today's time, I think, well, what's the right word to use? Probably developers are a little conservative in being open and transparent about communication. The assumption is that let the construction get over, hand it over, which, is like a fait accompli as opposed to keeping the consumer involved. They may be right, they may be wrong, and I'm not forming or, basing my judgment that either one is right or wrong. I think the appropriate way would have been to inform them well in advance, because the outcome is never positive if you don't give information in a timely manner. I'm not counting force majeure. I'm just talking basic promises, because, Kaveri water, but as long as you get water, may not be a big deal. Really, I mean, may not be a big deal. It's just, if that's a selling point and you've charged extra for Kaveri water, then you're in trouble. But then the developer should ideally be, gracious enough to return the money for whatever is that delta that you have charged. Outside of that, I think water is water. However, if, for example, you have promised, let's say, Japanese style garden, landscape garden that envelopes the entire complex, and, tomorrow you only give a small 10 by 10 square yard with 2 or 3 flowering plants, or, those tribe. Yeah, that is not right, if you ask me. But I think outside of that, people understand if you can manage expectations and tell them well in advance, is my firm belief. It is much better to be upfront and early, not late, and early when it happens. For example, Bombay, and I'll give Bombay as an example. Approvals for Bombay construction as you go higher is not taken at one go. You have your approvals come in phases. So basically, you get maybe an approval for one level. Say, let's assume for a moment, it is say up to the 8th floor. Right? The building, your assumption is that I'm going to build a 25-story building, 25 floors. And I'm just giving an example which is live, it has happened. And suddenly, because of aviation approvals, you can't do 25 floors, you have to bring it down to 17. Yeah. Right? And there's nothing you can do. I mean, this is outside your control because it is a central government diktat, or it's a government diktat. It was well managed by informing them in advance that, hey, this is what's going to happen. We can shift you to another unit because that's all that's coming up. Now, there are those outliers who will also tell you that, I'm sorry, I bought an apartment in a 25-story building. So I want to see 25-story, even though there's no logic to why you want 25, story. From a density perspective, you're happier with 17 stories. Yeah. But outside of those outliers, I think information in advance goes a long way in building confidence with the customers that you are carrying them along.
Sure. And what role brands play in this? I mean, the bigger brands, the known brands, the Prestiges and the Rahejas versus some of the unknown brands. What are one doing well and what are the others not doing
well? I call it a slippery slope. I'm not talking of a pure play real estate developer. For example, I'm talking of a brand where real estate is one of the plays. It is not the primary businesses. And the business has built its brand on many fronts, and it is globally recognized and etc. And then you get into this business. So you're right, the parent brand, which is what basis what you sell it in the first place, people will buy it because of the parent brand and what the parent brand promises. And then you realize that, hey, there are things which the nature of the product itself limits you from doing what maybe in your other product lines you could do, So yes, there is, and it helps you sell, but it can only take you that far. Because at the end, the comparison is A versus B, or A versus what you have promised me. And even that brand over 3 to 4 years, even though it may be a well-recognized brand, will struggle if it does not deliver on its basic promises.
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming to. I mean, some of the brands, most of them have gone, listed public as well now. If you see them, most of the people who live there say, there were hiccups, but then they delivered good quality. and so on. So you'll get reasonably good customer feedback from people who live in those kind versus some of the more unknown ones. So I'm trying to see, is delivering on their promise the main thing why these big brands have become big, or is there something else?
I wouldn't really go from the point of view of it necessarily being big brands. And I'll give an example. Take NCR as a market. A lot of big brands have failed, and I'll just take it on one metric: delivery on time. Okay. However, there are a lot of local and smaller brands that have done an outstanding job of not having missed a single delivery timeline. This is before RERA. Now with RERA, it's a foregone conclusion that you will have to deliver on time, or the penalties are so strict, severe, that the developer will not miss time. So I'm talking pre-RERA. It was one of very interesting that we find local developers actually doing a far better job. And let me give you an example. I think it's a very important point since we're talking a luxury brand, MD. A professional organization versus a developer. There is a huge difference in a lifestyle product like ours. And the distinct difference is the developer has a passion for his product. And I'll give you that example. The developer will make sure, because his brand is that product. He has nothing else outside of that. So you will find that his time and investment is in making an outstanding entrance portal, the gate, the landscaping, the driveway, the clubhouse, the entrance lobbies. You will find a local developer or a developer only would do an outstanding job of these, because that is the only thing that represents his brand. The apartments are at the end a cookie cutter model. I mean, you can't do much. It is a question of space, money, and it is at the end you close the door, it's your private space. It can never be open to public. But that versus an organization that is an organization will probably do a good job, but I would call it a sanitized job. That they will make it that, hey, you have all this, but it lacks that kind of passion which a developer has. So to me, a developer who does it well, you will see the passion. And I mean, there are enough examples of a pure play developer doing an absolutely outstanding job of what he has delivered as a final product, because it's got all the glitz and glamour, and he goes all out to do it because that's his personal brand. Unlike a professional organization. To me, very, very big in a space like this.
Right. That's fascinating. And of course, if customers are happy, the word of mouth spreads.
Absolutely.
Then, he can start charging premiums in the next project as well. Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how this works, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch to the tech and digital part. I mean, that's an interesting one. So where do we start? I mean, this is true brick and mortar business, as I said earlier. How much digital has it got, and where is it?
I think it has had digitalization as part of its culture in, say, the last 8 to 10 years. It has had. So, for example, a lot of it is technology is leveraged, but it is not seen on the customer side of it. It is always seen on the internal, like on your design. That you use BIM, you use CAD, etc. on the design side of it. In today's context, from a customer side of it, fundamentally, you would look at the CRM solutions that are perforce today. Earlier, it was all predominantly on Excel sheets. And I'm a living example. When I actually joined this industry, I joined it because of that reason, that, I was just I was in my interview, or when I was having a chat, it was a very interesting conversation. The first question was, every customer who calls and gives you a complaint, can we give them a ticket? And having spent 10 years in technology, you find that a little strange, because really, do we have to really start with a ticket? But you find at a fundamental level, that is something that didn't exist. It didn't exist. But very nice to see that they've moved beyond. A lot of investment, a lot of developers, large, medium, and small, are investing in CRM technologies, from Salesforce to Freshworks to, they're investing. So you can see them actually doing the investments, because they realize that at the end, the customer talks the brand. and they have no clue what happens, because if they just left it to, you know, an Excel sheet, they will never know what's happening. So their investment there. I think IoT is very early in India. Actually, it's very early in globally, because people have not really, what's the right way to put it? And I speak at a lot of these conferences, MD. You know, everybody says, let's talk of AI, ML, AR, VR. And I love these jargons, and I enjoy talking about it and telling them that
it's to give credibility to the conference, by the way.
It is, you know, and I think they do it from the point of view of it is pure peer pressure, or he has it, so I should have it, and not from a pain point of a customer, which this can address. And my constant point, or rather I implore all those who attend that do it because you want to address a pain, and it can help you, as opposed to, you know, just saying that I am AI enabled and not knowing what to do with it. You know, all this AI enabled chatbots, for example, are nothing. There is no intelligence in it. Very rudimentary, but you've spent a, you know, arm and a leg to get AI because, you know, AI is the in thing. IoT is similar. I think IoT has tremendous benefits in societies. IoT has tremendous benefits in two areas, and that's not explored as yet. Everybody's saying IoT should be in the house. I believe IoT can, if it has to really come in and make a difference, is in cost saving in societies. There's tremendous amount that can be done in intelligence to, you know, 30-35% of your cost is on electricity, power generation, on stuff where technology can help you improve efficiency by at least 30-35%. And then you move into the house. You know, I mean, nobody's really going to use my fridge is connected to my fan, is connected to my kettle, is connected to my mobile phone. You know, people don't want that much of intrusion. People respect privacy more than wanting to put it on the cloud or make it publicly accessible. The inside of the house. So that's a little time away. However, having said that, within the societies, there's a lot that IoT can do. And that's what I have been advocating, that society should use smart, green, environment friendly. Use that. For example, your garbage waste disposal, your organic waste converters, your diesel generators. You can do so much. Electricity using solar. How do I, you know, intermesh solar with conventional power generation? All these are very, very interesting. So I think there is a lot of play there with technology. It's early days yet, but I think real estate, definitely. Commercial to a large extent, yes, they've done it. Commercial buildings, because, you know, there is these are outward in looking. A lot of international companies have come in. They have their requirements, and hence we have adopted greener buildings on the commercial and retail side. I do think residential will get there a little slower, but they'll get there. You know, today, a simple thing on technology, you take a MyGate app. I'm sorry, I'm using a brand, but you take a MyGate app. It is so simple. You know, every security guard who can't speak probably English, but he knows that I will allow or prevent your access on a simple tool of an app. It is outstanding to see technology helping you. You know, it's just spread across. Everybody uses it. And I know if I'm coming to your house, that first thing I'll tell you is, hey, give me a code so I can enter. I mean, wow. You know, that's an amazing use of technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let me understand the motivations behind it. A developer, based on my rudimentary understanding, completes the project, hands over to the association or RWA or whatever, and then walks away, right?
Yeah.
That's how that works, right? So what is that organization, company's motivation in putting in IoT-like technology, which has downstream effect? I mean, the usefulness of this will be visible only after the developer leaves. So what exactly is the motivation for him to do this?
So it's not entirely true, MD, because as it stands today, you know, RERA mandates that you have a 5-year defect liability period. So you're committed for 5 years, irrespective of whether society is formed or not. You are invested, so you cannot get out. So let me first state that. So at least minimum 5 years, you are invested. You don't have a choice, right? Societies may have been formed, but the developer has a skin in the game for at least 5 years, right? So that's the first part. The second part, most developers, if they do and it's an interesting question, you know, the brand actually, the brand value comes after handover, not before. Because obviously you're right that when somebody starts living, they actually are experiencing a brand. Till then they don't.
Correct.
And unfortunately, if a developer walks out, he does not get to display his brand value because he's no longer there, but it's still his brand. So most developers, to a large extent, try and hold on to managing the facilities. Yes and no. I mean, their answer is yes and no, because they also find it's a painful job to do, that you're only handling complaints which can affect your brand. But I think the pain is worth it, because at the end you get to manage and you're holding fort for whatever time that you can. And that's my, if you ask me, my profound wisdom to any developer, that don't let go till as long as you can. Emaar in Dubai, for example, while it may be state controlled, etc., Emaar runs facilities themselves, their own. They compete in the market with other facility management companies. They are competitive, and they give an outstanding value because they've created a complete ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it is not just a residential complex. Because they have residential, retail, commercial, they're able to leverage the entire product value of theirs to give a unique experience which a standalone developer cannot do. I think that to me is an outstanding product, outstanding brand proposition. That somebody says, I don't want you to go because, when I sign up with X company, I get benefits which are nobody else can get. One of the developments is, for example, you have a mall attached to it and the mall belongs to the developer. You wouldn't want to let that developer go because you get trade-off benefits to your whole family by having a mall around which may give you some benefits which nobody else gets.
Correct.
So from that point of view, I think there is an intrinsic value in developers wanting to hold back and continue managing in spite of the fluctuating pain. And the pain fundamentally is manageable. It's not something unmanageable. And they shouldn't look at it as an ROI model, a pure ROI that, these don't give returns, because it's a high volume, very low value. Maintenance, facility management, but it's from a huge brand recall, brand value. I think the valuations are in multipliers if you can do a good job, that people want you to stay back and not ask you to go.
Yeah, interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Actually, you stay on so that you kind of make sure your brand flourishes.
Absolutely. If you go and see a clubhouse which is deteriorated and poorly managed, people will look at it not from the RWA or the society, but they'll say, my goodness, that brand delivered such a poor quality product, which may not be true because, these guys are not willing to refurbish the clubhouse. But if the developer can retain it, he retains that brand value, and people coming in 10 years later. And there are quite a few examples. If it's a progressive RWA, then no problem. But if it is not, then the brand suffers.
Sure. Interesting. So that way, so let's come back to the tech. I know I kind of deviated from that. So coming to the tech, so you're saying most of the, developers now have started using at least a CRM. Is that right?
Yeah. In some form.
Complaint management.
In some form. Yes.
Complaint management is there in place.
Yeah, in some form.
In some form. Okay, interesting. And where do you see that go? I know IoT side, I understand, but purely from enabling technologies for customer management, where do you see that go?
So I'll take a couple of examples. And I think COVID, I know I don't want to keep talking of, the pandemic and stuff like that, but it has done some wonderful things. Let me take an example of a buying decision. And I love quoting this example. Earlier, MD, if you were going to buy an apartment, and let's say it is for your son who's in the US, right? Typically, you're an empty nester, you're in, say, Bangalore, and your son wants to make a buying decision. He relies purely on his parents or somebody in the family to go and have a look, and then he takes a decision, right? And he is completely isolated or cut off from being involved in that decision because of distance and where he's located, he or she is located. And I found this fascinating. Let's take the use of VR or maybe the same parents, MD and his wife. You'll happen to go and you'll find a place somewhere, or your child is in the US and wants to make a buying decision. You actually walk into that complex and you have the VR set on. You and your wife have the VR set on. I'm using AR. Okay, I shouldn't say virtual reality. Let me use AR, not VR. VR, I think, doesn't work. Yeah. Let me use AR and MR because that is far more personalized. It gives you a real connect with the environment around you as opposed to VR. So let's just keep VR aside. You're sitting there, both of you all, you have your headsets on. and you're actually doing a virtual tour in a live place. So you're actually in the live place and you're walking around. And I found the stitching of content so amazing that you actually walk to the balcony of your apartment and the view is the real view that you're going to see. Now, these may be stitched together through drones or whatever it is, but you're seeing that, and your family, say your kids, your extended family, say the kids and their siblings, or or your whatever, the extended family across the globe can log on to a device where they are sitting and go through that immersive experience along with you. So you're that one nodal point who actually is experiencing it live at that site, and everybody's going through it with you live. I find that fascinating use of technology for a buying decision.
So how much of that is available today in India? That kind of
technology? It's in a proof of concept stage only. It's in a very, very rudimentary. People still think VR works. I don't think VR works because I think VR, unlike HoloLens, I think HoloLens has tremendous potential. And that because of the pedigree of the parent company, you can link it with MS Teams, you can link it with whatever, and you can stitch it all, the content very, very well in a video-enabled environment. It's early days. It has not yet been thought in those terms, but that's the excitement, that you can make those decisions. And I just took one example of a purchasing decision, and I think that itself is outstanding if somebody can do that. Because my thought going forward is there'll be very few, we are going to see an Uberization of real estate too.
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so...
oh, sorry to interrupt. By the way, just a quick thing to the audience, guys, please post your questions. I know there's one over there. I'll take a look at it, but please feel free to post questions for Ajay. Yeah, sorry, Ajay, I interrupted. You said Uberization.
So I love using this word of Uberization. My sense is our children, they are no longer, I think we were the crossover generation, so to speak, that we were caught between, families that our parents wanted us to get into a traditional engineering, medical, the foreign services, etc. And we are a crossover to our children. The next generation will not want to own. They would want to rent because they don't believe in getting tied down on an investment which sucks up 30, 40 years of your life. Fact that is they jump jobs are, and you've been in the call center industry, so you understand. They're happy to earn the money, spend the money, right? They're not interested in a lifetime investment of, my goodness, if I can't enjoy that lifetime investment, why do I want to make that investment? I would rather stay. So, things like co-living, etc. are phenomenal concepts. Co-working, co-living. I find that very attractive, that people will rent more. So you'll have developers who probably tomorrow will move out of a model of, they will move into a build and lease or build and rent, or a concept like that, which people wouldn't mind doing. So, you just move in with a baggage, with your bag, and you live, you pay the rent, you've got a great community. Co-living does that wonderfully well. And you move on, and you have nothing to carry. You have no, you're not burdened by debt. You're living life on your terms. I think that is Uberization. To me, it will happen sooner than later. Apartments will get smaller because families are getting more nuclear, and they will move to a model where they would rather rent than buy.
Yeah. Build and rent or build and lease is very common in the US.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Especially around university towns and all that. You have so much of that actually.
Yeah, but that's a little different because that is it's called purpose-built student accommodation, PBSA, as a model. But that is very specific to only the duration of a student's existence on the campus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking of beyond that. The co-living model is basically where you say, I love this concept that I'm living in a place where you have amazing facilities. On a weekend, I don't have to step outside because, you've got an MTV grind happening in my complex itself. Why will I step out? My friends come to my complex. I live here. It's a happy life. I can go out on the street and I'm not burdened by, I have to take an insurance policy. There is seepage, leakage. It's all outsourced. Everything is managed. I just live a happy life. I think that's a wonderful expression of where I think the times are heading.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if that comes in. Do you see any chance of it happening soon? I mean, do you see any trends in that, Ajay?
Yes, I think if you see the way the apartment dimensions are changing, they are no longer grand, big. I'm not talking of the uber rich or the high end. I'm just talking, if you take at a fundamental level, the units have moved out from being larger, 3 bedrooms, to now they're moving to studios, 1 bedroom, at the most 2 bedroom, because families are that much more nuclear today than earlier. So that's the first step that's happening. Apartment configurations are getting smaller, right? And you'll find a lot of acceptance for studios. Maybe because in our country we have a population, which is age group of the youth that you require. That mix is changing, but I think it is heading in that direction. And I know this, and I'm taking this I take it from a personal point of view. My own daughters, for me, that's the best example. That they've seen us, put in our lifetime investment, and then you are paying mortgages, you are paying in EMIs out. Then there is this job security issue. Now, imagine their logic is, why would I ever want to put in money so far in future and I don't have security? If I don't have debt, then I can choose to live my life on my terms. And I think that's fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. We have a question here from the audience. Will quality of experience management vary if it is run in a captive or in-house versus an outsourced, especially in categories like real estate and timeshare holidays? Exactly for you, this question.
Oh, this is brilliant. And this is something that I, in fact, almost got lynched in one of the conferences. I'm a total advocate. MD, sorry, I'm not the greatest advocate for an outsourced model, especially on a high involvement brand. To me, the front door to the product is the service experience. And any outsourced model can never have that emotional connect to the brand. Very, very tough. They can do a very, very good job on metrics or, SLAs, but their involvement in the product. So my belief, and to whoever the question is, thank you. Maybe you're somebody who's attended some of my conferences, but I appreciate the question. I'm a firm believer from a brand perspective, even though you may outsource manpower, I'm not saying don't outsource manpower, but any customer-facing organization where I come from has to be done in-house, because whoever is representing your brand, if they don't live the brand, they will never be able to give you a solution. Real estate as an example, timeshare as an example, I don't believe outsourcing works. Outsourcing from a third party running it for you outside, off-premise. Let me use the word off-premise. It's not as much giving it out as a contract, or how your HR views it as an expense. I'm not talking of that. It can be outsourced as manpower, but has to be run on-premise. I'm an on-premise man through and through.
Sure. Let me extend that a little bit, that same question. So let's take timeshare. It's an easy concept, easy. So, how does somebody who's answering a call, talking to a customer about an experience, let's say in Munnar, how does this person even visualize that? How does a person know what it's like to stay in a resort in Munnar? How can that happen?
Brilliant question, MD. That is, and great on timeshares if we're talking about it. Every member of my team actually was taken to the resorts and stayed in the resort.
Every resort.
No, of course not. It's not possible to do every resort. That is definitely not possible. However, I think let's address the core of the issue. The core is not the ambience of that particular resort. It is what is the brand, and the brand is the service experience delivered in any of the resorts, right? So at the end, you're staying there for the service that is offered, not as much the product, because the products can vary depending on location. One you've got in Kumbhalgarh, which is a fort, and one you've got on the beach. I mean, the experience is very different. However, the service experience of, say, the fun rangers, and the reason I say that, the differentiator is a fun ranger. For somebody to sit in a resort and actually see how families are knitted together, have a meal with those families, it's called fun dining, to go through a fun dining experience, to look at what amenities are placed in a room, to see how the rooms are done up, how food service is done, takeaway or whatever, how a luggage, your baggage is picked up and taken to a room in the resort. If you see the experience and the quality of the people, because they are actually now treating you like you automatically have an empathy to saying, wow, if this is what is the actual product delivery, I'm part of it.
Interesting.
So you get where I'm coming from. It cannot be 100%. It is, it'll never be, but you get the service experience.
Yeah. So to me, there's two parts to it, right? There's a service experience, which your team can kind of go through, but there is the experience of being in a Kumbhalgarh versus a beach and so on. Do you think it's a good idea to get customers involved in answering those questions?
Yes.
Would a customer service rep actually say, hey, I can't answer this, but let me put you in touch with this person who just spent last week over there?
Yeah. So it may not be literally what you're saying, but I'm getting the context that you do customer testimonials on video. That if you're saying Kumbhalgarh and hey, should I go or not? And you say, hey, you know what? I've got a video of a customer or of a guest who just checked out 2 days back. Would you like to watch that video of the guest? Because you must understand there are privacy issues around getting customers to want to talk. It is very, very few of them actually want to talk. So, but as long as you can tell them, here, talk to a live customer who can tell you what his or her.
No,
the other way of looking at it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. You finish.
Yeah. The other way of looking at it is if the customer wants to talk to somebody at the resort and wants to have a tour of the resort, that can be done with, but it can be any one of the resort fund rangers, for example, who with a video camera on a helmet or in his hand can actually take you around and say, hey, this is live. I'm live right now, and I'll take you around and show you the resort. Okay? Of course, it's possible. Sure. And the person says, oh, wonderful. The beach. This is the view of how the beach will look like. If that's your point, right? That I don't know how far is the beach from the resort, and I actually take you and show, hey, this is where the beach is. Of course, it can be done. Yeah, and that's great use of technology.
Yeah, and also you can have forums and stuff like that. I mean, you can always point people to a TripAdvisor or something like that, because most of these get covered, and people have both. I mean, the parts that they enjoyed and the parts they didn't like. It's reasonably fair.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, cool. We don't have any other questions, so let me finish with my last question, Ajay. So we spent the first 20-25 minutes before we started the main event on marathons, and of course then we got into the nuts and bolts of customer operations and customer service. I asked you a little bit of this question earlier on. So from your own personal experience, how has your leadership kind of style changed over the period of time, from the time you started? And how did it change specifically after you started getting fit and exercising and running and triathloning?
Okay, that's not a tough one, MD. Running or exercising has been in my DNA from I don't know when. So that has not changed as much. Yes, but your point is right. Marathon is a different kettle of fish as opposed to running, 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers, because what marathon does, and I think it's a beautiful correlation to your life as a professional and running. Marathon basically is all about pacing. It's mental toughness, because beyond a point, you will lose some amount of physical energy. That rigor to say, and I keep saying this to people who want to start out on the journey, is never look at your watch. Just look at completing the distance. Because in your mind, then you're developing a habit of execution. That the end outcome is I have to finish the run as opposed to running for 10 minutes. So from that context, it has a very nice linkage to execution mindedness. Because there are times, and we are runners, but there are times when our bodies do not behave the same way on every run. It changes. I've had times when and I must tell you this, in one of my first runs, that was the first run, in fact, they gave us oranges to eat, and orange is a great source of energy. But they never told me that don't swallow. So I swallowed the whole orange. I sucked out the juice and I swallowed it. And fair enough, 10 minutes later, I was retching. because that does not get digested, right? And when you're running, your heart is pumping and that doesn't go down. So I actually brought it all out, but I learned that lesson that, hey, what can you have and not on the way? So pacing, for example, that your planning is not on the 21 kilometer end, but let me first finish my 5. Then I do the next 5. So you're pacing yourself to make sure that you have enough in the tank to hit the 21. And this is on every race. I mean, no matter how many you run, you will still do the same over and over again. So there's consistency to it. Second, it brings about a discipline. There's tremendous amount of discipline. It's not an easy thing when you tell people get up in the morning and run at 5 o'clock in the morning. The discipline to want to do it is because you're outcome based, saying, hey, I enjoy this run. For me, I enjoy this run. And the outcome is I finished 10, 12 or 15 or 21 kilometers. And then, of course, process rigor. As I rightly said, there's process rigor. And the eventual thing is that you've achieved something. I mean, that breasting the tape at the end of a 21, I must have done 40, 50 half marathons and whatever. That every time finishing that 21 is just an outstanding feeling of achievement.
Right. I mean, it's a big kick which you get.
It's a big kick.
How do you translate that to your people? How can you inspire them?
I think where they understand, and it's not been very difficult, MD, is they understand. You start living that in your day-to-day life in terms of not having conversations which have no purpose. I don't mean casual conversations. I mean professional conversations. It all gets toned down to saying, okay, if you are doing this, it has to have an outcome, and an outcome has to be time bound. So you look, I mean, actually you're doing a marathon run while you're having a discussion on any execution of a product, right? Saying, hey, I understand that we eventually want to increase, but please, it won't happen. What are your, 2x, 4x, 6x, 8x, and then 10x can happen. You're breaking it down into chunks. So your brain is processing it in exactly the same manner as a marathon run. And people understand where you're coming from. They may not draw the conclusion, but as long as you can get the message across that you're thinking on the same lines, I think people understand that and appreciate it.
Cool. Very cool. We have a question from the audience, by the way. We'll make this the last. How can we reduce customers going on social media even after having an in-house CS, customer service?
Okay, I mean, there's no correlation between you having in-house, outsourced, CS. Customers understand social media is a very powerful tool, and I'll state a few. Keep aside the few outliers or the ones that are just noise. There are those, but then the reason they've actually gone there is because there has been some failure or a gap in your service delivery, and you're not paying attention to them. I was just giving this example yesterday. In India, we got used to shouting because we think that if we are polite, pleasant, and peaceful with whoever is doing service delivery, they take you for granted. Sadly, yes, to a point it is true, but I think social media should never be banned. I think it is an outstanding and a sure shot. It's like instant coffee. You get the message instantly, and the world gets to see it. Wow, and correct it, because if you correct it, I think you've already improved by one step. Then you take the next one and improve by another step. It's all about that. We are not perfect, not by a long shot, but as long as you're open to, earlier it was very inclusive, inward looking. Organizations still are to a large extent, ND, and I'm sure you also, you also recognize that we keep talking of this so-called customer centricity. It is a nice byword in your vision and mission statements, but companies are still very inside out looking as opposed to outside in looking. From that context, social media doesn't give you a choice to be inside out. It is outside in. You don't have a choice. You have to, you set your course, you set yourself right. Otherwise, you'll just get completely swamped.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, some people say good things on social media as well. So it's not
very rare, but yeah, very rare. But I think the appreciation is on service recovery. That if you have appreciated a complaint and taken action, like in hotels, we call it service recovery. And I must give you a sidebar to service recovery. Service recovery is not a business model. It is only purely that, a recovery. I've heard people say, hey, you know what, shall we build a big model around service recovery? I said, no, if the soup is cold, make sure the soup is hot the next time and not do a recovery every time, because there is a cost to it. And it is not a model, right? So it is only to be used as service recovery to improve.
Sure. That's fantastic. We have kind of run out of time as well.
Wonderful.
Ajay, wonderful having you. Thank you very much for your time and the energy and passion with which you speak, Ajay. And thank you, Freshworks. They've supported this event. And with that, let me hand over to Renil.
Thank you, MD. Thanks for being a very entertaining and engaging host and moderator. Appreciate it. I've had a wonderful to kickstart it with Marathon. You really knew how to get me on with a topic of that nature.
Yeah, and by the way, those who missed that, Ajay and I spoke about fitness and marathons and triathlons, I think between 7:10 and 7:30, I think, probably for around 20 minutes. Recording of that will also be made available, just FYI. Over to you, Renil.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, MD. That was indeed a very interesting, insightful session, especially into customer service in real estate, right? Which we not really are aware of that much, at least from our angle, at least. So thank you for the session. If you do have any questions, please do write into MD, and we'll be happy to take them offline. Look forward to seeing you at our session next month.
Next month, the session is on March. I'm sorry, what's the next month? April 29th, by the way. So see you all then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.